The Liveliness QoS policy. The Liveliness QoS can be used to test whether or not data writers are live and able to send you their data. Now, why would you need to do this? Well, let's take two scenarios. One, you have a data writer that constantly is sending data. It's sending data periodically. It's a periodic data writer. Now, with a periodic data writer, as long as you're receiving data, you know that one, the data writer is alive, and two, network connection is good. If you stop receiving data from a periodic data writer, that's a pretty good indication that there's a problem. Either the application is crashed that's sending data, or the network is crashed. Now, what happens if you have a data writer that is not publishing data periodically? For example, you have an emergency stop button. That emergency stop button is not constantly telling everyone to stop. Frankly, hopefully it's never used. But you do want to know that if that application does need to send out an emergency stop call, that you get that message and that application is alive to send that message. So how do you do that? Well, use the Liveliness QoS. The Liveliness QoS can be used for non-periodic data writers so that in lieu of data, if the data writer doesn't send data, DDS will send a packet indicating that that data writer is alive. And that packet is either a heartbeat packet or a liveliness assertion packet. So let's see this. If this data writer is sending data, all is good. All is good because DDS knows that that writer is alive. If the data writer stops sending data, then after a configurable, what we call least duration, DDS will, on the behalf of that data writer, start sending heartbeat packets. This isn't data packets. It's just a little packet that tells data readers, hey, this guy's still alive. Now, DDS can only do that if the original application is still up. If the original application dies, then after the least duration, because you don't receive either data or a heartbeat, the data reader will find out the data writer has lost. Liveliness has been lost. So hopefully the data reader has something to do when that happens. Let's talk about the configuration of the Liveliness QoS policy. The first thing we have is something called least duration. The least duration is set for data writers and data readers. For data writers, this means that the data writer will signal, either send data or a liveliness packet, at least once every least duration. When you set this value for data readers, it means please check to make sure that data writer is alive at this least duration period. So every least duration period, it's going to look around and make sure that it's received a liveliness assertion for all the data writers. Now, by default, the least duration is infinite. An infinite least duration means that don't check. Don't signal that you're alive, and you don't have to check that you're alive. So by default, liveliness policy is not used, it's turned off, and that's turned off using an infinite least duration. Liveliness kind is used to configure how the liveliness assertion packet is being sent. By default, if you turn on the least duration, you have a non-infinite least duration, by default, it's automatic. Automatic means the participant that contains the data writer will automatically send a liveliness assertion packet for its data writers. It will take a look at all the least durations of the data writers that it has and use the smallest least duration in determining how fast to assert liveliness or send a liveliness packet. Now, in some situations, you may want to manually assert. You want application code to tell the other applications, yes, this application is alive, this data writer is alive. There are two manual configuration values. One is manual by participant, the other one's manual by topic. Manual by participant means that at least one data writer in the participant has either sent data or you've called assert liveliness on that data writer. Or you can also call assert liveliness on the participant object itself. So somebody in that participant has asserted its liveliness either by sending data or by calling assert liveliness. But these calls must be done by user code. It's not going to be done automatically for you. If you want to get very specific and test a specific data writer itself, then you use the manual by topic kind. Manual by topic kind means you either call write to send data or you call assert liveliness on the data writer that's supposed to send the data. That will either send data to the other side or it'll send a heartbeat to the other side. And then the data reader will use that to make sure the data writer is alive. Assertions per lease period. Assertions per lease period is only used when you have automatic kind. And this, together with the lease duration, actually determines how often the participant will assert liveliness. The Liveliness QoS policy is something you set both on a data writer and a data reader. And note, the Liveliness QoS policy is only something you determine whether or not a data writer is alive. The concept of liveliness doesn't apply to participants or data readers, at least not in this context. For the Liveliness QoS policy, it's only the liveliness of data writers. But it is something that you set both on data writers and data readers, because the data reader might require the data writer to have liveliness. So the data reader can request the Liveliness QoS policy, and then depending on the kind, the data writer either gets matched or not matched. So the data writer must offer at least the same level of service as the data reader requests. And manual by topic is a higher level of service than manual by participant, which is a higher level of service than automatic. So let's take a closer look at when the Liveliness Lost event is triggered, as in what's the timing for finding out when an application loses its liveliness. So here's an example. The data reader has a lease duration, which automatically just gets started. So as you start the data reader, it will have lease duration, and within that lease duration, the liveliness must be asserted by a packet that's received by the application. So the data reader must receive a packet. It could either be an actual data packet, or it could be a data M packet. A data M packet is a liveliness assertion packet that's sent by the participant. Or it could be a heartbeat. A heartbeat is a liveliness assertion packet that's sent as part of the reliable protocol or by calling assert liveliness on the data writer. So if you're receiving the liveliness packet during the lease duration, all is good. But let's say after you've received a couple of liveliness packets, the application crashes. In the next lease duration, you don't receive any liveliness packets. You don't receive data packets. You don't receive data M packets. You don't receive heartbeat packets. Then at the end of that lease duration, it's going to say, hey, I didn't receive any liveliness packets from that data writer, so I'm going to notify the application that that data writer's liveliness has been lost. So why is the Liveliness QoS important for command and event data? Well, for some connections, it is critical to know that a connection is intact and will work if it's used. Not just a connection, but the application on the other side is able to send you the data. For example, the launch command for connecting a control center to the rocket sort of needs to know, hey, I'm actually connected to somebody who's going to command me. Or emergency stop button to all the subsystems. The subsystems wants to know that if emergency stop is sent, I will get it. So when you have these kind of connections, data is sent occasionally, non-predictably, okay? If you had a periodic connection, then not receiving periodic data immediately implies that there's a problem. But when you're not receiving command or event data, that just could be a normal operation. So you're going to need the Liveliness QoS to assert, to send basically metadata packets to test the network to make sure that everything is good. Now, alternately, you don't need to use liveliness. You may want to explicitly have a user-level topic. So you may create a topic that's periodic. So you are going to create a topic that periodically sends status or health information about the application to everyone else. And then if the application crashes, then the other applications stop receiving the periodic topic, and then you could use a deadline QoS to detect that. So you could either use a Liveliness QoS for non-periodic topics, or you could use a periodic topic and a deadline QoS. They essentially do the same thing. In summary, the Liveliness QoS policy is useful to determine when there's a viable connection to a data writer that's not actively sending data. So instead of data, metadata packets are sent by the DDS. So these metadata packets could be heartbeat packets, or they could be what are known as data M packets, which are our liveliness assertion packets. When the data reader receives the data, the operational capability of the network to send the data from the data writer to the data reader is confirmed, as well as the health of the process that's containing the data writer.